I would look too for us old years.
And we have just the 3 items, is that correct?
Mine are all.
I couldn't hear.
Peter's gun. Yeah, because they didn't preach hearing protection. We thought it was fun to have your ears ringing.
Hey, Tony,
Made it through the blizzard.
Oh, here I was all rushed.
Jason, how we doing? Jake?
Good.
Good.
How you doing for an older guy, Dave? Okay.
Well, I'm not gonna
Basically.
worry about the snow, that's for sure.
Supposed to be a good one, isn't it?
Yeah,
So as soon as Wes comes, we can just go ahead.
It's like it's been a long winter to me.
about 2 winters, but we'll be
Yeah.
glad when we need a drink, right?
That's true. Yeah. Makes spring a lot better.
Ty mentioned to me the other day, they're letting water out of Echo just in preparation.
Wow.
I'm hearing some very ugly things about that Devil Slide Bridge up there. They're talking
Ooh.
about they're talking about not being able to get that done.
Have they
Because of-
started?
Well, they started in November, but because of the water they're letting out in the high water, they're talking about they're way behind schedule and
Oh,
thinking of some sort of a temporary measure or I don't
Wow.
know.
you know, that may slow our bridge project down too.
One of the problems they're having up there is that the railroad's right there. You know, that railroad trestle's right there by that bridge. And
Yeah,
the Union Pacific's giving them a lot of grief with their, slowed them down quite a bit up there, I believe. So
is that right? Wow.
that's what I'm hearing. Of course, we're not dealing with the railroad, so
Yeah,
but hopefully our bridge project will continue on
yeah.
as scheduled.
Oh, the railroad's causing trouble at in Croydon.
Double slide, yeah, right. Because
Yeah.
right there, right next to the bridge is that old wooden railroad trestle that
Yeah,
services the cement plant. So
Yeah.
they get worried about vibration and all sorts of things up there. So I guess they're having quite a time. I think the people in Croydon are getting tired of driving over through Hannaford to come to Morgan's.
Yeah, for sure. Well, tell them to count their blessings. They don't have to go to Colville.
North Summit.
Yeah, or
Hey, there's Justin. What do you got to have a quorum? 4 or 5? 4?
Yeah, just four of the 7.
Okay, so what we're gonna go ahead and do is start the work session. Our vice chair will be here in a couple minutes, but we can get it started. Jake, if you want to go ahead and pull up your stuff and we'll start working on the general plan
And then just FYI, and I apologize in advance for this, but I've had a conflict come up, so I'm gonna have to, I can be for the work session, but I'll have to leave at 7. So, but it doesn't look like, but I'm still reachable by phone if something critical happens, but Tony knows better than that. He'll take care of it all.
of course.
Tony always does.
Great. Well,
Absolutely, yeah.
well, let's go in and jump. I would say so who do we have there from the Planning Commission that's present?
So currently it's Justin, Aaron, and Ray. Nathan is not going to be at a meeting, or Lance, and I didn't get anything from Mark. I double checked. I don't know where Mark is, but
Well, Jason's there too, Teresa.
yeah, and Jay is online.
Okay.
Oh, and here's Wes. So we have Wes, Jay, Jason, Justin, Aaron, and Ray.
Okay, great. Well, good evening, everyone. It's good to see all of you. I always like being there in person. It's definitely my favorite. but Teresa was kind enough to say it'd be all right to zoom in, considering I'd be going up and back in the weather for the canyon twice. Anything from the planning commission? I do think the planning commission vice chair should open the meeting or the workshop, but any discussion before we jump into the first item, which is general plan discussion? Any questions about the two other items, the ordinance or the boxcar sign?
Jake, you want me to open this meeting? I finally made it.
Yes.
Okay. Welcome everybody here tonight for the Planning Commission meeting. We're going to talk about general plan update and discuss some agenda items. And so let's turn it back over to Jake and let him roll.
Okay, great. Thank you. Well, let's jump into the general plan. So this is our last chapter. I'm kind of excited because after this, I'm going to take all of our notes and comments, kind of bundle it together and send it back to our consultants with a kind of a long list of updates and recommendations. This is the Parks, Open Space and Recreation and Trails chapter. And the first thing I think I really would like to see the Planning Commission set a goal on what level of service of acres of parks per 1,000. Right now, you're at 3.14, which is low in terms of national standards, a little bit low for Utah standards. What I've heard from the Planning Commission in our previous meeting is that the city's making do in terms of enough fields and parks, but people feel like there's not enough space for sports, but also other activities. One thing to know on the parks per 1,000, parks impact fees can only be set to continue the same level of service. And so what that means is that to raise the level of service, it will need to be city funds, general funds, grants, donations, in-kind service, whatever the city can do to raise that. Now you do have, is it 5 acres of park that hasn't been built out? I know you have the land for kind of the second park that just hasn't been built yet. Is that correct?
Jake,
Say yes.
Jake. So a couple of years ago, the city purchased a piece of ground between the new townhomes there behind Tractor Supply, between those townhomes and the river. I'm not sure. I grab my phone, I can tell you how big a parcel that is. The city owns that with the thought in mind of
Where's it?
you're almost to it. It's pardon me, but it's kind of behind the old Ken Tucker Fur Farm. That didn't probably help you out any, but
Jake, you're right on it right now. In the bottom left-hand corner is Tractor Supply. It's where your cursor is.
Yep.
yeah, and so that was purchased not too many years ago, and with the thought was at some point in time we may be able to develop that into a park as well. Is that correct, Dave? I don't want to misspeak here, but that was my understanding.
Yeah, that's been done and available.
Great. So in that sense, the city's well on its way to raising that bar.
Jake, just so you know, it's Teresa. On that particular parcel, quite a bit of it's in the floodway. So we are going to be limited to what we can actually do there. Just to let you know.
Okay. So a fair amount of it may be passive uses, trails. I don't know for sure, but maybe ball fields. sports fields. However, probably no structures and no parking in that floodway.
By the way,
Correct.
Jake, it is just over 5 acres.
Okay, great.
Jake, just for me, access fees. You said we couldn't increase access fees?
Park impact fees.
Oh, impact fees.
Now, your park impact fees have to be based on the level of service. Now, the city's already bought that land, and let's say the city developed that park, not using impact fee. Well, you can't raise the level of service. However, you could use impact fees to build it, but you couldn't say we want a higher level, we want a higher impact fee because we want a higher level of service. It's basically to maintain your level of service. But if you use that money and other monies to build out this park and other parks and raise that level of service through other means, then you can go ahead and raise that impact fee if you so choose in the future.
Jake, what's the benchmark then? Where do we, you say you can't raise it, but raise it from what?
Well, I think what I'm saying is in the general plan, they have listed this kind of goal of maintaining a level of service of 3.14 acres of park per 1,000 residents.
Mm-hmm.
I'm suggesting that the city double it and go to 5 or 6. A lot of areas of Salt Lake County are at 5 acres per 1,000. A lot of places in Utah are between 5 to 7. Nationally, the average is 10. The reason in Utah why we have a little bit less is because we have such good access to public lands and trails and all of that. But that land does not mean we have parks for park usage. However, we do have a lot of public lands. And so that's kind of why cities don't necessarily, I mean, our parks are not as cool as other places in the country, but they also don't have the mountains and outdoor recreation like we have as well. However, that doesn't necessarily mean we should limit ourselves. But this is a question for the planning commission, and then the city council will also need to agree or change it.
So to raise it to 6, because the general plan's adopted, is that the new benchmark? Is that the new level that we say we can't go above as far as service is concerned?
No, you can go above it. It just means that the impact fees can't be based upon raising it.
Sure, but it would be now 6 rather than the 3.
Yeah, and that 6 would be a goal. It's saying
Yeah,
as a city over the next 15 to 20 years, because that is their horizon of the general plan, 15 to 20 years. Typically they're updated sooner, but you say over the next 15 to 20 years, we want to get to a point where we have 6 acres per 1,000. And the reason why a lot of people like that acres per 1,000 as a broad benchmark is because as population increases, you're also saying, let's keep adding parks so that we can keep up with our needs and demand. And it doesn't mean it has to all be ball fields and sports as well. It could be skate parks and trails and mountain bike or pickleball or part of a rec center. There's all kinds of things that you can throw in that acres per 1,000.
So Jake, so what you're saying is 6 acres per 1,000, right? That's the goal. Is that what we're saying?
I'm throwing that out as a recommendation, yes.
So with a population of 5,000, we're talking about 30 acres of park.
Let's see. Yes. You are talking, yep, that's right. And right now, let's get to where you're at.
That's a lot of park.
Well, and maybe that's where you tone it down to 5 or so.
Let me ask you a question. Currently it's 3.14. If your suggestion goes to 6, you're suggesting we double it. If population didn't change, my question is, do we as citizens think we need twice the park space we have today? That's what you're saying.
Yep, that's the question.
You're
And
saying we need twice the park space today for our current residents. That's what you're proposing.
One of the things to maybe consider on this park is most of us sitting here, we live in the country, and when we bought homes, we wanted a bigger lot. So we have big yards and stuff, but as the growth starts, we've all seen that we're getting down to townhomes, 1/4 and 1/5 acre lots with hardly any yards and stuff. So access, take your family to the park, probably makes good sense. As homes and everything get smaller and smaller.
Well, I think part of it was not only we want more park, but I think we talked about like, how do you use it? What are the amenities in the park? Are there more pavilions to book? I can't, like in the last few days on Morgan Moms, people are asking, where do I gather? Now it's winter time, it's a little tougher outside, but that's what they want, as much utility in the parks that we have, which I think is as important as the space. I think what people really want is things to do in the space that we have. So I'm all for increasing things to do and even going with more space, but doubling does seem like a lot considering we do have a small amount. And I get it's an aspiration, but I think it's okay to put a larger goal than we have, but doubling is a lot.
And if you look at the park over there, the ballpark, right? You take that whole parcel that's the park, how much of that is just grass? It's not a ball diamond. It's not skateboarding thing. It's not pavilions or anything. There's just a lot of that is just something to mow.
The west
So-
end doesn't get used.
Yeah, utilizing what we have that with a little more innovation maybe is as good as increasing just to say we have it.
That also brings up the issue of how do you maintain it? That's probably one of the bigger issues with more spaces. How do we have the budget to maintain it? Again, I think everyone agrees we want more amenities, better space. I'm all for increasing that number that we have, but doubling is a little much for me. But I think we can push one that's at least aspirational enough that gives us some runway, but not overdo it.
Hey, Jake, just take this for what it's worth. I'm not suggesting anything here, but would like a recreation center count as far as your equation's concerned?
Typically does the land. I mean, it is a service, and a lot of times a rec center is part of fields or other things. That's pretty common to have that included in. And also, if the city's going to build a rec center, you're going to want to get the land first. And so just getting that land as well. And I don't think that parkland that you have is included in the current numbers.
It is not.
Okay,
And,
so
just let me, on that piece of property I was talking about earlier, just make one little quick comment here. That also was looked at being right next to the river as possibly becoming eventually part of a expanded trail system as well. So I'll just throw that out there as well.
yeah. What have you heard from your youth groups and sports teams and fields? Do they need just a little more? Do they need a lot more? In the comments, there was a lot of discussion on not having enough space. And maybe that means just 1 or 2 more parks, maybe you just need 5 more acres now, and certainly not doubling it.
Sorry, I don't mean to be so vocal. What's the county's plan over by the pickleball courts? I've heard that they're possibly looking at making some soccer fields over there as well. I don't know. That's what I've heard. So not sure what their plan is over there by the pickleball courts, but that certainly could open up some venues as well.
And I would agree with Tony on that one. There's some pretty good plans for that to expand recreational opportunities. And assuming that we get the Riverwalk Trail, the Mickelson Mile extended, that's gonna go right over there. So even though it's not technically in the city, certainly all the city residents are gonna take advantage of that, if and when that happens. I think the question is what, there's gonna be a debate. Again, Morgan Mom's the place to be in the know. There are some different opinions on what that should be used for, more soccer fields or more water, river access, recreation opportunities. But regardless, that is going to be developed to be more recreation, which certainly helps because it's right on the edge of town.
Jake, are
Yeah.
you, are you kind of suggesting, it's better to have the property bought and figure out how to use it than say in 15 years go, man, the city could have bought that parcel of ground and we could have had a park right there and it would have been perfect. Is that, we just
Yeah,
want to make sure that
definitely.
in the future that we have somewhere to build.
Definitely, land is never cheaper than it is now. Typically speaking, of course, recessions and things like that can change it, but definitely that's that case. I just ran a number. If you increase it by 25%, that puts you at 4 acres per 1,000. Rounding up, that goes to 4 acres per 1,000 if you increase it by 25%. And maybe that's a goal that pushes the city a little bit, but also is not putting all the resources into parks.
Jason, you got something?
Yeah, just a quick question. As far as the service, I was being really specific about the service number. Like we've agreed to maintain the service level of 314, moving it up. Does that have anything to do with the actual services provided at the parks, like mowing and water and like the actual services the city's required as an ongoing basis? Or is the service number just a reference as a ratio?
It's more of a reference as a ratio. In terms of the detail, maintenance and all that, that's of course up to Parks Department and services on that. And I don't know how you feel that it is now, if it's okay or really lacking.
I think our parks are taken care of really well. As far as I can tell, they seem like they're maintained well. But my question is if what's at the park has anything to do with the service level requirement. Like if we were to choose something that was very service requirement heavy versus something very not service requirement heavy at all, is there any reference to like the city's maintenance in regard to the term service? Or is it just more of the ratio of the number?
I think that would be considered under a second item. Kind of, that could be a second goal is in terms of having the amenities. Now I'm kind of seeing two things there that in terms of our discussion, there's the amenities at the parks. And I have heard from the Planning Commission, all of you, that you want to see more amenities at the parks that you have and future parks. And then Jay, you're kind of talking about the quality of the maintenance on it. And that's a little bit more into operations. I might be missing your question.
Okay, so we're just talking about a ratio of the percentage of space. We're not talking about any type of quality service provided, weed eating around the baseball diamond, mowing the thing, cleaning the bathroom, as opposed to just a park where you don't have to clean the bathroom. Is there any, like the quality of the services? Are we talking about anything about quality, or are we just talking about space ratios?
It is quality as well.
Okay.
Yeah, that is part of it.
So if our current is 3.14, but our desire is to have something, let's say the service requirement from the city is high, whatever that may be. Maybe that's parking that requires snow plowing and grass mowed and water, like, is there, I guess that's what I'm trying to balance is like the recommendation of like, it's one thing to have just a park full of dirt that you don't have to do anything with. That's a low service requirement. Or a park that is high quality that all the Morgan moms are going to want to spend time at because every grass is plucked properly. And so that's what I'm trying to gauge is if there's anything to do with quality. And it sounds like a little bit here, but the number sounds mostly a ratio.
It is mostly ratio, but these are parks that you're maintaining. This number doesn't include the 5-acre park by the river or the 5-acre piece of land by the river. And, that's not counted towards it. So there certainly is a maintenance part. And two things to think about, or at least one thing is the city's put in for a grant to do some park and trail planning. And so that'll go more into the kind of detail you're talking about. And so this is kind of one of a number of things for a general plan to be looking at, big picture.
Jake, correct me if I'm wrong, but we need to buy the property. And then as the need arises, then the city and the city council, they will look at costs and whether we get grants or increase in tax or whatever it is, but that's secondary to securing the property so that we can build a park down the road 5 years or 10 years or whatever it is, right?
Yes, that's the most common way. The second way is with large developments. We've talked about doing a master plan community where the dairy is. A large property like that, the ordinance could require actual parkland towards the city. And so that's the second way is with large properties. I mean, Daybreak and a lot of other, bigger master plan communities they either deed land to the cities for parks, they actually build and give the park to the city. So that happens a lot actually with bigger properties. So that's the second way that happens besides going out and purchasing the land. And then the third way is in-kind donation. A family wants to have their name on a park and so they go for it.
So, Mr. Chair, just from a development staff, and when we look at developers that come in and they're looking around at different parcels, obviously we spend a lot of time seeing where the open areas are for development. And so if you can picture that at the same time, yeah, we have a beautiful park in the middle of the city, but then people don't want to have to drive to parks. You've got the Turner area, you've got the Ralston area, you have the Jenkins area. They're all potential developments. And so increasing the number to have something more substantial than what we have will prompt that when that development comes in, we need to meet our ratio. And now you've got a development that, because they're increasing our, how many people live here, we also need to, it prompts that we need a park in a huge development. If somebody bought all of the Turner property, that's quite a bit to develop, and it would be nice to have a park over there. Susan Ralston, well, large. If she ever decided to want to sell that, you've got another area that could be a potential park, so that's what, increasing that number will help too.
Jake, suppose you set your goal for the master plan at 6 and 10 years from now, it's only 4.5. Is that a problem?
No, then you would just recalibrate it and say, oh, maybe that was too high and let's lower it back down. I mean, general plans are aspirational. And so, it should be a goal that's reasonable and can be reached, but also something that pushes a city in a direction they want to go.
So it may make sense to not limit ourselves, and it might be easier to go down rather than go up.
Yes.
You don't limit yourself either way.
I want to point out here that I put this on, I send you this PDF. I would say, in my opinion, you need at least two smaller parks on the east side, and then two, the northeast, and then one in the dairy area, but that would come with that development. And then the other is over in the Island Road. I mean, the core of the city is served really well, but once you cross the freeway and get to other parts of the city, there's just no access to park within a reasonable distance, and the freeway is a major barrier.
Jake, not quite correct from my perception. If you look at that map, the things you've got up there, I think you've addressed the one that's in the pinkish area.
Yeah.
That's our water protection zone.
Okay.
You can't put one there. You can't put trails there.
Okay. And okay, I got that on here.
And the one straight below that. Yeah, what have you got for that one?
They list this as a trailhead.
Okay, to go to where?
I don't know.
That train there doesn't allow you to go anywhere. Because that bigger green area is blocked off by the wildlife people. And that train there is steep hillside.
Okay.
Trails gonna go
Understanding
nowhere.
Is that there is actually, the county's worked out something behind Geneva to get us access back there. And I don't know if that's where they're recommending the trailhead is, but that's the closest spot to it, I think.
The
But-
recommended trailhead is by the hitching post.
Is it supposed to go there? So
That's
this
that's
isn't the
what's-
right
That's where
spot.
it's gonna go.
Okay.
That or the old state road shed.
Yeah,
That's down here, right?
That
I
thing
never-
is too steep. You can't even get a bicycle out of
Right.
that side.
But
The
if we,
train, go walk that. That's not trailhead.
but if we set the
Oh.
number, then it's incumbent to find the property to match the number. If we're trying to get to 4,
But we're talking about,
get creative,
what about that? Those places are not even feasible for a park, go west.
and then we'll
Get
get
my
one
car
somewhere
tomorrow
else.
afternoon, I'll go show you where he's talking. You
Okay,
can't even stand on that ground.
we'll find one, maybe somebody wants to,
Okay, the one to the that next one to the left there. Again, terrain wise, I used to live right across the street from that. That is a steep hillside. There's not a flat piece of ground there for a park. You haven't got any homes in there at all. There's no people in that that can get to that one. That one right there.
Yeah. And what I was thinking, it wasn't necessarily meant to be up above 600 East, but just in that area.
Come up and I'll go walk it with you. There's not a flyer there to put a park.
That one's landlocked, right? The one you're talking about.
That's just across the street from where I used to live, Tony.
Yep.
Straight across the street between myself and Dave's place. Hey, Ralph.
Right.
So are you saying the city should not try to get parkland
I don't think
north of
that-
the
I don't think
freeway?
Put a park in that area. Okay, go further down. You maybe don't know this, but down there in Mahogany Ridge, they have a private HOA park down there already. That services those people down there. It's already there.
Right. And the thing about the HOA and private is those are all just, they add to a good park system.
Right.
You can't reserve them, they're not part of the city system, but they do provide a benefit to the community.
For sure. But again, let's look at a map that shows residents and people and streets. There's not a space there left for a park.
but Ray, I think what we're saying is, okay, you picked out the ones that we can't build. But if we're trying to hit the number of 4, then we got to figure out where to put the parks. That's all they're saying. Tell me where we can't build one, I understand, but
He's gonna publish that map to go in our master plan, okay? I don't wanna publish a map that's impossible to do.
could we,
to adjust it.
could we do something like, rather than pin it like that, you kind of shade like, almost like a Venn diagram where you're just saying, okay, hey, park in this radius of an area, right?
Yeah, and that was the intent is to have, I was thinking maybe you need 2 north of the freeway, but maybe it's only realistic to do one on the other side of the freeway.
Where you put it, Jeff?
Mr. Chair, can I ask a question? This goes back to what Teresa was talking about. So are we, Riverside, I think is 10 acres. I mean, so if we went, 4 per thousand, we had 5,000 population, you're looking at 20 acres. Riverside's 10. Are we looking at would we look at another park of 10 acres, or would we look at maybe 3 or 4, what I would call pocket parks?
Where you put ruler, Jeff?
The two biggest factors to park usage is proximity to the residents. And then the second one is having the, amenities and facilities that you need. And I think you have the land, or a good chunk of land. And so the second question is, do you want to have something smaller or closer to them? And I think that's part of a good park system is having a few smaller ones, and they can be HOA, but you can't always rely on that as well.
Jake, Mayor had a point about up there in North Ogden. You want to share that?
On the sunny side of the freeway, that's pretty dry up above 700 East and steep. About the only possible place you could even think of a park would be when that development where Young's auto dealerships are, when that develops along the freeway. Then I'm interested to find out if we have a,
Take their detention pond and turn it into one.
yeah, but if we have a plan, an overlay plan where a developer would come to the city and the city would project their ideas of it, isn't that where we can put a little bit of responsibility on a developer to participate instead of just setting this is the spot we want to park, where these bigger developments we could say, like say the Turner's property, that would be a wonderful trail all along East Canyon Creek and up along the Weber River to where you could almost make a circle and hook into Mickelson's Mile. So those kinds of things I think I'm more interested in. I don't see any problem with dedicating, whatever ratio we need to. It doesn't mean we're held to it, but it would be better to be high than low, in my opinion.
At least we would, my frustration sometimes is it seems like we're always playing from behind on a lot of these things when developers come and we're like, well, we really don't want that, but don't really have a choice. And like what you're talking about is get out in front of these developments and say, okay, this is what, if we're going to develop this parcel of ground, the city needs a park in here, figure it out. And somebody will.
Yeah, and I think it's valuable right now to do it when it's slow. Get it overlaid now so that we can't say, oh, you're picking on me. But if we get the plan now when things have slowed down, then we can have a little bit more of a hand on what kind of development we want, where we want to park, things like that.
Let me ask if you agree with that then. 3 areas where the city would like to have a park in the future, not specific parcels or streets or area. North of the freeway, north of the river at some point, and then Island Road at some point. Those parks in those 3 areas would probably double your coverage. And this doesn't necessarily say how big or where or how it happens, but just an aspirational goal that you want to park in these 3 areas. What would you say to that?
Yeah.
Can you not limit it by saying parks?
May I ask a question?
That assigned.
Is
Justin, go ahead. Justin has something.
Well, Jake, I agree with that. I was just saying the 2 things we need to decide tonight is give you a kind of a number that's aspirational, gives us some space. And then 2, I think we're saying it's very difficult to pinpoint those locations right now, but I think what you just said is fine. Let's designate regions where we would like to have a park that can go on the developer. So if those are the two things you need from us tonight, I think we can, I mean, I guess I don't really care what the number is as long as it doesn't hurt us in some way in the future. And if that means put it at 6, great, put it at 6 because it gives us lots of runway. I guess I don't care about that. So I think, Mr. Chair, that's what we need to do is give him a number, get a number to him. If that's double it, fine. And 2, I say, instead of putting more specific stuff that might just mislead people, just say, here are the regions we want parks and or rec areas. And I think that's what we
Yeah,
want.
I agree. It gets us out in front of developments, and we know that in this area, there's gonna be a park. And whether it's however it's built and the location is determined on, will be developers basically probably, but we can get out in front. I like that.
Here's an idea on the park ratio level service number. What if tonight you gave me a range, and then I go back and talk with Ty and city staff, and we say, okay, what are you supporting now, and what could we get up to in the future? You know, with more residents, more sales tax. You know, a few kind of tweaking things in terms of maintenance. So maybe that you don't give me an exact number, but you give me a little bit of a range. And then Teresa and myself go back to Ty and others and kind of say, where should we land in this range that's aspirational, but also realistic, looking down 5, 10, 15 years.
Aaron, you've been quiet.
May I ask one more question? On that southwest portion of the city, the Fox Point area, is that big detention pond or retention pond there? Is that used for park-like activities? I mean, do they practice there? Do they play soccer there?
It really isn't. I don't know the answer. Could we put a couple benches in it? Could we put a couple amenities in it? That's a possibility, but currently it is not being used for that.
I mean, I understand you couldn't put anything permanent in the pond itself or what would be considered a detention pond, but I'm wondering up on the bank, could you put, I mean, I'm just
Residents said, yeah, you could put her there and they enjoy it.
just thinking, could you put restrooms up on the bank? Could you put swing sets up on the bank? I'm just spitballing here, but
That's an
could
easy.
that detention pond eventually?
There's
Talk amenities, but I think what Jake's asking for is a number. Aaron, you had something?
Not really. I mean, I agree with everything that's been said. I don't know that the number really matters because it is aspirational. I do like the idea of just picking regional places rather than, as Ray said, picking specific spots that may or may not work and throwing that out to the public and looking like we don't know what we're talking about. I would be fine with anywhere between 4 and 6 as far as our aspiration, if we could potentially give that as a range and then let staff decide on what would be a more appropriate number. I don't know, just to get the discussion started on that.
Yeah. So we're at 3.14, right?
We're up high.
High right
Hi,
now.
yep.
So Jake, what's the number in your head?
I think that 4 to 6 is a good number. I mean, if Morgan City want to be known for its parks and put a lot of effort into that, that would be the 6 number. If you're saying we just want to increase a little bit where we're at in terms of our park coverage and increase our amenities, then I think 4 would probably be really good. I'm hearing that you're underusing the land that you have, but I'm also hearing that some people think you might be a little bit low to meet your current demands. You know, if this were summer and games were happening. Does Morgan City want to work with the county in terms of hosting tournaments in the summer? I mean, the temperature is nicer. I'd much rather go to a tournament in Morgan City than I would in Tooele. And, you know, there's that question too. But you can only control your plan. You can't control what the county does or what private lands do.
One thought here, everybody. I remember we moved here, I don't know, a long time ago. But I remember going into Park City. Okay, going down the main road to the old part of the city there. And I remember seeing that giant park almost to the old city. And thought, my goodness, that property is worth so much money. And they would, all them little houses hadn't turned into, $10 million homes and all that stuff. Point is that was 35 years ago or so. And it seemed a little bit overkill at that point. But now you drive into Park City and everything's built up, and it's so nice to see that big open area, and it's kind of grown right there inside the city. And as things change to skateboarding and pickleball and all that stuff. So I think it's a grand idea to do what we're saying in a region, pick a number, 1 to 10 and try to hit it. And at least we have something to work with in the future.
Ray, I want to make sure that I understand your objections or concerns. Were your concerns primarily with the spots that were chosen rather than the number or the amount of space?
Yeah, my concern is just, if we put this thing to print, it goes out there, and there's a spot there, and come with me tomorrow afternoon, I'll show you. It's impossible to put a park there. I'll meet you at 3 o'clock in the afternoon, I'll come drive there and I'll let you walk. So my intent is, if we put this thing to print, it ought to be some things that are at least realistic. It could happen. I don't mind putting a park in that other side of the freeway. That's true. That's great. But the locations, the exact locations, are not even feasible. Yeah, not even feasible. An overlay piece is an awesome idea, but the exact location, it ain't gonna happen. I rode a horse on that hill too many years to know I can't play softball on that.
Yeah.
Okay, Jake, where do we go from here?
If I say I'm gonna talk with Teresa and Ty and others and come back at a number between 4 and 6, is that okay? Something that's aspirational but also realistic. Is that okay?
Yeah, I would push it to 6 if we could, but we'll need it one day.
And I'd agree with that. I think Morgan's unique in that the private ownership of the hills is very high. And so even though we live in a world of beautiful mountains and free ranges, they're not available to the people in Morgan. And so if we lived in Heber, it may be a little different. If we lived in Tooele, it may be different. But right now, getting into the hills around here is not very easy. And so the things we can control is our parks. And at the same time, you've got communities like Ivans in St. George saying, we don't want as many public utilities because everybody's nightly rentaling down here and it's a disaster. So it's a catch-22. You want to be friendly, it's great, but then when they're too friendly and there's too many people, then you wish it wasn't so friendly. So it's an interesting balance, but Morgan's really unique with the private ownership. And it seems like you'd want to skew towards more parks because of the limited hillside availability.
You have a really good point, and I think that does go into the trails in terms of almost all your land surrounding the hillside is private. Okay.
Hey, can I add one more thing, Mr. Chair?
Yep.
You mentioned working with the county. There is an active transportation committee that is actually the Trails Committee. I think that would be extremely beneficial to make sure that the plans, the aspirational plans that the city has correlate and cooperate with the county plans.
Great. Okay.
I got one more thing that I just remembered was in the meeting with the folks that was laying out the general plan over a year ago. And I asked the gentleman, the question, is Morgan growing faster than expected? And he said, actually, we're growing at half the rate as expected. So we really want these things in place because when it comes, it's gonna come quick, from what he said. So just something to think about when we're doing this.
I think you're absolutely right. We've got 10 minutes more on this. So as you've read the document, is there anything that just jumped out that you want to bring up to the group and discuss? Anything small, tedious, errors, just email them to me. I'll add them to my PDF and they'll go to the consultants working on it. So any major items in terms of the plan you'd like to see changed in terms of the document?
Jake, I got a question. If we establish this, do you have a number in here for the city on how many dollars per acre it will cost the city to maintain this? Because that's always a factor. That affects all of us in the city with taxes and stuff. Is that part of this plan? No.
That was part of my thought in terms of going back to Ty to talk with him so that our aspirational goal is based off of some maintenance numbers. But no, I don't have that number. Maybe Teresa does or the mayor.
I don't. I know that right now we're currently going through our budgets, and our last meeting with the park staff, they were supposed to get numbers, and so we have them available, but I don't know them off. So-
Okay.
What, one typo, Jake, I'm not sure where East Cottonwood Creek is in Morgan City. I know where East Canyon Creek is, I don't know where East Cottonwood Creek is.
Yeah. What page is that on?
It's on page 99, right-hand side, halfway in the middle, underneath map 22, bottom line. It's several places refers to Cottonwood Creek throughout the booklet. And
Okay.
I did that before. We have a
Okay.
east.
What is it called? East
Canyon Creek.
East Canyon Creek.
So Canyon, not Cottonwood.
Okay. Got it.
You cut the other typo, fine.
Okay. Great. Thank you.
There's some other things on the map we've talked about before. That aren't there. I guess the question is, do we leave the maps where they are? Or if there's stuff that the maps on the map legend has listed there, it's not even on the map, do we take those off or just leave them there just for cause?
I think they should go. That's good.
All right, at some point, you can talk about that on the side.
Okay.
These maps do have the city boundary, annexation boundary, and correct. As we talked before, several other chapters didn't have it correct. You indicated earlier that this was the last chapter. My recollection is back in chapter 2. We didn't finish that. We got so involved with that. We decided we'd leave that and come back to it. That was what I thought, as far as the zones, what the zones are. And I didn't think we solidified what we want to do for the zones.
Okay.
I thought that was still in the air.
I can bring that back next month.
What are you thinking? What are you at? But that was my recollection that we left that one up in the air. We couldn't come to a conclusion on what the zones really are, what they really mean, what they really say. You did some work on it. I appreciate the work you did on it. I don't think we come to a conclusion on it. I can be wrong. You got better memory than I've got.
What does the rest of the planning commission say? It's up to you. We could bring it back one more time, or we could move forward and giving everything to the.
Is there harm in leaving something on the ledger? This is still not ready for the public. Well, I mean, this is public,
but it's not ready to proceed, you would see an updated version of everything. And it's going to take the consultants a couple months anyway. So I actually think we could probably give them everything and just say, hold off on the future land use. I can tag probably the 3 pages that Ray's talking about, and we could talk about it next month. But also at the same time, the consultant group could be working on everything else, which is about 90% of the document or more.
Jake, the chapter 2 is probably the most controversial. I think you'd want to make sure you've got that nailed down.
Okay. Why don't we do that? If the planning commission's okay, I'll pass everything along to the consultant group and then let them know which pages to hold off on, which is the future land uses, some of the zoning recommendations, and we'll bring that back next month so that they can proceed, and yet we can go through that one more time.
That makes sense. Okay.
Okay.
4 minutes before meeting starts, everyone. Anybody got anything else? Jake?
I just have one thing regarding trails. If there's any place you say it'd be so great to have a trail here or there, just maybe bring it up now. Or if you agree where these proposed trails are. And on the river, it's just saying on the river. It doesn't necessarily mean it has to be one side or the other. And also some of the other areas. It's just trying to get those trails through the city.
My question was more along our agenda item with the historical overlay sign. We're still doing that right tonight. Do we have any questions there before we throw all of them at them to discuss? That'd be my, for example, looking at the pictures, if we were going off our color palette, this definitely would not go, right? Correct. I'm just saying that has been the discussion before. So let's clarify what we're actually going for here and what can apply and what does not apply. So can we, if we agree that is the color palette for the building outside, then we need to put that out of our minds for the signage.
Amen.
Right? Okay.
Any cut works on the sign.
So that's the next question is, does that mean that we don't have any other style guides for signage? Do we not? We don't have one, right?
It
Because-
passes, it's what the code says.
So I think this goes into, so just my opinion, this goes into more than just signage, but in general, we talk about some uniformity and some style the city should have. Park City kind of has a style, and you go down to these other newer places and they have a style. I think we should consider that. Like you said, we have to be stewards of the code as it is, but going forward, I don't think it would be a bad idea for us to consider the style that we want to have. How do we want State Street to look like? How do we want Commercial Street to look like? How do we want any other commercial or developments to look like? What's the style? And as of right now, I don't think we can hold them to any other style other than what they propose, right?
So Jake? I was warned by my wife to just go easy on this one. The planner before you, we had a discussion, I guess that's what you'd call it, a discussion about a sign. And he finally just said, we don't have a leg to stand on. It isn't spelled out in our code. And so I can't figure out how we can't get out in front of this signage thing, because this is the second one. And we're not gonna beat this dog to death on this, but can we get started on getting this sign code narrowed down a little bit nicer? Can you help? I don't know if I'm speaking out of turn or anything here.
Um,
Just,
Jake, I can
Just-
probably answer a little bit on this is what we ended up having is, as far as staff, tie-in staff, we have been working with a historian, the Historical Society. They were going through that fine tooth comb, our particular, to get it to be an easier read and some more specific, that's changed hands and I kind of not sure where we're at. We didn't have it on the list for Jake to start working on. It's still, so anyway, that's where we're at on that. And I know Steve I saw him start talking, but
well,
Do you know if you were working with the Historical Society or the Historic Preservation Committee? Okay.
So two questions are, and well, an observation. If you look at the picture that shows Commercial Street, I mean, if you look at the different styles on all those signs, you're like, oh, there is no coordination there. So I guess that's a comment, not a question. But the question then comes to what you just referred to. Is as a historical district, are there any requirements that we're holding people to? In regards to signage though, there is, so
There's size.
size and shape, but there's no color.
The lighting, there's lighting and size.
okay, we are.
That was it.
Where? Steve?
Yeah, I was just gonna say, I mean, I don't know where it sits today, but I understand what Weston was saying about the enforcement of it, but the historic overlay zone had a lot of guidance in it. I mean, even in historic, you look at some of the historic pictures of some of the old streets and the signs are not uniform, but there's a sampling of fonts and colors that might be different, but that was kind of the overall atmosphere, or I should not atmosphere, but the overall look that we were going for. And so that's why in that historic overlay zone, there are examples of fonts and sizes and configuration of the letters, those type of things as a guide for the developers or the builders to look at and select from that. And so that is something that has been adopted, even though it only says guidelines in it. You have the ability to say, hey, these are your options. You can work within these. We've had some people say, well, our name is somewhat of our logo, our copyrighted logo. And so, you know, we provided some flexibility there, but yeah, we didn't want to mandate a singular font or a singular paint. And that's why there was the palette and the explanation of the different options. But within those guidelines, you most certainly can direct them that way.
Perfect. So how do we get this started, Steve?
I do think you need to open up the regular session.
Okay. We're heading that way. Okay. Let's close this work session and let's see you up on top.
Yeah, you can continue work sessions beyond. I mean, you can start your other meeting a little bit late. You could wait and finish your discussions beforehand and then just repeat them in the regular meeting if people are interested in that.
Yeah,
Okay. Okay, so here's my point on this. This is the second time that the city has been told what we get. Okay, we all know about the, whatever it is, the fly fishing place or whatever it is, tackle place. We were just basically told, hey, this is what we're doing, this is what you get. And because it's kind of in there, then we just basically didn't have legs stand on. Same thing here. So I guess my point on this, Steve, is we're getting, I don't know how to get it conveyed that, hey, the signage is an important thing in our historic district, and here's we're not being, ornery about it. Here's the palette, here's the size, here's that kind of stuff. Could we please work with your designer and stuff prior to them bringing it and saying, oh, I've already done all this, and we looked at the colors and we looked and it's okay. That's my frustration that I told my wife I wouldn't bring up, but I did. Go ahead.
No, that's exactly what you do. You give them a copy of the ordinance, saying, here's our guidelines for the historic overlay zone. Bring us your proposal based on these guidelines.
So supposedly this is within those.
And the commission is the one that gets to make that interpretation.
Thank you, right?
I think probably I heard Steve say is you can continue the discussions and opening for this meeting after a regular meeting. We need to go to the regular meeting and either discuss this after the regular meeting, or you put it on the agenda for the next meeting to discuss the sign ordinance in detail to get directions from the planning commission to Jake to redraft it if we want redrafted. Or maybe we need to understand it better, know what's there and what's not there. There needs to be an agenda item if you want to discuss the sign ordinance so we can clarify what's actually there.
Thanks, I'm the new guy here, so. Okay, we'll close this work meeting and we will figure out how to bring it up in our next meeting. Okay.
You do that. That's certainly a thing to do.
Okay.
Jake,
Yes.
Question for you, Jake.
Yeah.
As far as your draft you got put together, if you'd want to send me the draft of everything you got before you sent the people to redo the whole thing, I would look at just for typo, just for clarification, not necessarily meaning. If you want to send everything you've done to me, I'd look at that if that's something you want to consider doing.
Yeah, I'd love that. That'd be great. Happy to do it.
Send me everything you got at this point, or before you send it to the people to redo it. And I'll just look at, see if there's some things, and I'll, of course, pass it to you and let you look at it. Maybe you and I can talk about that.
Okay, happy to do it.
Okay, thank you.
Can you add things to a PDF? Do you know how to do that, where you just drop a note on a PDF and type it?
If I don't, some of the gals here can show me how.
Okay, good.
Denise will show me how.
Okay, that sounds good.
Ray, can we get this thing started so I can go home, see my wife? You said by me if you don't cause problems. Okay, let's get this meeting started. Okay, tonight we will be reviewing the parks and trails portion of the general plan. Jake sent out a copy of the section of the general plan to be reviewed tonight along with the comments. So I'll turn the meeting over to Jake for the discussion. After this discussion, there will be time. We will discuss briefly the agenda items. Oh, okay. See, I told you I'm the new guy. Okay. Where does she have me? Oh, right here. I think I got it.
Yeah.
Okay. Look, I got a smart wife. Okay. So if has everyone had an opportunity to review the minutes of December 20th, 2022 and January 17th, 2023 meeting. Could I have a motion and a second to approve the minutes?
I'll make motion for minutes.
Okay, do I have a second?
I'll second that.
Okay, we have a motion by Ray Little and a second by Justin Reese to approve the minutes of December 20th, 2022 and January 17th, 2023 meeting. Is there any discussion on the motion as stated? No? Okay, then can we have a vote? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Teresa, vote was unanimous, to approve both sets of minutes. Oh,
We're good.
Okay, okay.
You're right, we're good.
I see Jay raised his hand.
Yep, we're good.
Okay. Okay, so item number 1, historic overlay sign discussion for motion smoking box car. Okay, so the city received an application for the sign permit of smoking box car restaurant on Commercial Street. Since the building and the sign is in historic overlay zone, it is requires review and approval by the planning commission. Jay, could you direct the discussion regarding the application for the sign permit?
Yes, okay. So the property is located on Commercial Street. And it's actually 2 buildings and 2 properties that are together, but 1 business. And this picture is not current. You'll see another one that is, but building 1 and building 2, there are doors up and light fixtures and definitely looks better than that right now. These are the drawings submitted by the applicant. And regarding the proposed signage, it does meet the requirements in terms of size. There are specific requirements, how big it can be, how tall it has to be, how wide it can be. There are requirements on materials. Signs cannot be plastic. Metal is an appropriate material. They are recommended as metal. This picture was provided by the applicant. I'm guessing that means that it's already done. And I will say there is the point about the colors not being compatible with the palette. Also, the colors not necessarily being compatible with the rest of the downtown Commercial Street. That's a good point for discussion. The material of the corrugated metal, considering it, it is across from the rail line. There's the railroad station there. There is the historic tie, you could say, of the idea by the owner of the boxcar. But I do see the point about maybe the font and the color, and that'll be up for the planning commission decision on that. Here's a picture provided by the city of current, what it looks like this week, and you'll notice the light fixtures are up, and they are the same. They are very similar to the light fixtures as the previous sign that was approved. They do shine down. The one question I don't know is if the light fixtures are of a softer light. That's what the ordinance says about the light type, but bulbs can be replaced fairly easy. So with that, just want to kind of highlight, it does meet the code requirement in terms of size and materials and depth and height. But because it is in the commercial overlay, there is the discussion in terms of font, color, aesthetics, and historic. And this point here in my report, interpretation of historically compatible is up to the planning commission. And metal is appropriate. any questions for me? I don't know if the applicant is there in person, if they also have any comments for planning commission.
Do you have anything to talk to Jake about? I have a question for the applicant, just for our information. Did you come and talk to the city about size, color, design, or did you just, we're trying to figure out a process as a planning commission?
I actually did talk to him about the size when I came in. There was not really a discussion on the color. I've been in business for 6 years. That was kind of like my trademark that people know me by. By putting that on the building, people recognize that and they will come to my building because they recognize that. It's kind of set up as how the name was brought up was, you see all the graffiti on the train cars. That's how that was brought up. That's just a graffiti that I created for my food trailer that was painted just like that. And it's just my trademark. So people know who I am and they come because they know who I am.
So, yeah, along with that question, so that the color scheme, the font was all your creation.
Yes,
Fantastic. And that follows along with your previous, all your other business, your food truck before that,
right.
and so on. Did you actually do the artwork on that? Did you?
So I did. That matches the interior. The bar is set up just like that. I don't know if any of you have been in there, but the bar is set up just like that. It just kind of looks like an old train car. That with the trains going by, people love it. They just really, with the name, the atmosphere, they really enjoy that coming and eating and seeing the trains come by and how that kind of blends all together.
Ray, you got something? No, you're like, okay.
I'm hungry all of a sudden, so.
For the commission, we're trying real hard because that's the historic part of town that trying to get some uniformity. And I understand I own a business and signage is really important. And what we're trying to figure out is this is the second company that has come with the sign already completed and say, hey, do you like my sign? Instead of maybe coming and saying, hey, what would you like to see down there? Can we work something out? So that's what we're struggling. Oh, Jay, you got something?
Yeah, thank you. So just in general, so we don't kick it off, I want to give it a positive note because I know we do a good job of tearing it apart. So I just want to start out with positive. I support the recommendation of the staff. I lean on them a lot. If it follows the rules, I trust them. And second to that, the fact that you created that and now you have a business in Morgan across the street from the train tracks, it's like artistic genius. The fact that your brand could align that well to your circumstance is quite amazing. I understand it's progressive. It's certainly not historic, but I think it's character. I think it shows character. And I think it's going to be a real challenge for us to look past historic versus relevant here. And it just seems like a perfect match. And I agree the brand you've designed is a little outside of what we would think of historic Western commercial Morgan. But yet at the same time, it's so relevant. And so I would just encourage, I want to start out with something positive, and I just want to encourage everybody to just look outside yourself for a minute, because the relevance of that and the match of that is, it feels to me like 99% perfect, and we can go beat them up all we want on some graffiti, but it is just so relevant to me, and it's artistic genius in some levels. So you know how I'm gonna vote.
Okay. Is there a motion to approve the sign application as submitted from Smoke and Boxcar Restaurant on Commercial Street?
Jay, you ready to make a motion? Go ahead, Jay, make the motion.
Yeah, I can make that motion. I make a recommendation that the planning commission make a positive recommendation to approve the sign for the smoking box car as submitted.
Yeah, it's just to approve it, not recommend it.
To approve it, not recommend. Noted.
Do we have a second?
I'll say it.
There's a motion by Jay Hackett and a second by Ray Little to approve the sign application as submitted for Smoke and Boxcar Restaurant on Commercial Street. Is there any other discussion on the motion as stated? If not, we'll have a vote. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
And Jay raised his hand. Okay. Any opposed? Teresa, the vote was unanimous to approve the sign application for Smoke and Boxcar.
And here's just one thought for the planning commission. If you'd like to further discuss this, you could add it to a future agenda item. And I think the question could be, does the city want to continue the current trend of being very specific on buildings and a little bit more flexible on signs? Or in the future, do you also want to be a little more specific on signs? And that's just a question that the planning commission could discuss that. And if we need to tweak things in the future, you can. But I'm just throwing that out there that you could. I see two pathways forward, but that would be a discussion item on a future agenda if you're interested.
Thank you. Okay, let's move on.
Good luck.
And second item on the agenda is to continue discussion from work session regarding mixed residential housing overlay zone. So I'll turn the time back to Jake again and for the rest of this discussion.
Thank
Jake.
you. Okay. This is the same ordinance that we've been working on for a few months now. And I think we're getting closer here. I've been updating it and making changes as we go. And if I'm missing anything, please let me know. Again, don't worry too much on the format. I still don't know where this is going to land in your code ordinance online, but I'll find a place for that soon. But so I do want to focus on the content here. I've tried to highlight in red things that are a little bit different than before. I'm going to work through this and anything that I think we need to talk about, I'll bring up.
Jay, can I stop as we go?
Sure.
On that first one, just, if this is an overlay, does it need a rezone?
Yes, it does.
Okay, that was something I wasn't aware, okay. So if somebody comes in and want to do this, they would need to rezone the area.
Correct.
Yeah, I wasn't, like, for example, in downtown, we have a historical overlay zone. They don't rezone when they want to use historical overlay. So I didn't know overlays needed a rezone.
In this case, think about it this way. This is a zoning tool that's sitting in your zoning toolbox. But when a developer wants to use it to a specific property, they come in and apply for it. And it all happens at once. And the value of that is we can use land use tools that we couldn't otherwise. According to state law, you can't do design restrictions for single family homes unless two things happen. One, it's in an overlay zone, or it's a master development agreement. In this case, we're going for both of those. And that's where this tool gives it to you. And this is a flexible tool also, so that a developer could say, I have a good piece of property, I've developed a nice plan, I'm going to take it to the city and go for a rezone and site plan approval.
Okay. On the screen, it's up that last word, that gross. Help me understand what that means. 10 gross.
That means the whole property, or excuse me, that is the maximum number of units. So if it's a 7-acre property, then you could do 70 units max on it.
On the whole place.
On the whole. And so that roads, parks, all of that is included in that number in terms of your max density.
Okay. All right, so it's not a per acre, be 10 on the whole, okay, all right, I can understand what it says.
And I do want to mention, I did have a discussion with Mr. Nye, who's looking at using this, and he made a recommendation on clarifying some language, and I just want to let you know how he read it was that you have to use 30% like either single family, medium, or small, and 30% townhome or two family, but that you couldn't have a minimum of 30% of units from each. And he had a really good point. So I want to adjust the language that when it says 30% of the units come from each list, that it doesn't matter if it's small or medium single family, or if it's townhome or two family home. It's just a minimum of 30 of each. And it doesn't have to be exactly one or the other. That was how it was intended, but I think the language just needs to be clarified based off of his feedback to me.
In that same paragraph, Jake, down the right-hand side where it says, if an odd number of units can be allowed, the building type may include one more dwelling unit from the other type. If I put numbers of that whole sentence doesn't make sense to me. I'm not sure I need that sentence. If I do the math on 30, yeah, I think that sentence doesn't even need to be there.
Okay.
30% of 40 or 30% of 80, I come up with whatever that number is and round that up and there's the whole number. I think that sentence can be deleted totally.
Okay, I'm gonna put a line through that and come back if.
You can look at later, obviously, but I don't know what's on that one.
I just wanted to make it sure if we run into a case of it being 3.3 acres and it's just where we hit a rounding error or something like that. I just want to make sure we had a clear message that we didn't have a fight over one unit up or down kind of thing. So we'll come.
Jake, wouldn't that just save the planning commission a meeting or two if we had a little allowance in there, if it's an oddball number or something? I'm trying to understand why to take it out. If somebody will come and ask us to change it. But Ray just says we just round it.
All that's
So-
saying, if you have 40 units in there, 30% have got to be one kind. You take 40 times 30%, that tells you how many have got to be from list 1 or from list 2.
Oh, okay.
That's all you do. If you can have 100 units in there, you take 30% of 100, and that many have got to come from either list 1 or list 2.
No.
That's the minimum number. You got more than that. That's all the whole paragraph's saying.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, and this last sentence, maybe this solves it, fractional numbers less than 5 round down to a whole number, and 5 or greater round up to a whole number. And the other thing is requiring a minimum of 30 from each, then it makes it easy to do math, as long as you have that 30% number from each list.
I want to compliment you, Jake. It looks awesome. You've done a lot of work on it. It looks great. It really does. And I think it's working.
Oh, good. Thank you. Okay, so again, homes face 2 places. I think that's what makes this a little bit unique, is that there's flexibility in that a home could be, a dwelling unit could face a street or a common area, but also we don't get units facing weird directions, and nobody's looking at a parking lot when they open their front door or something like that. And this is a very common theme as the mayor, myself, and others have toured Daybreak and other developments. You do see this, either you're looking at a little common green area or you're looking at a street. Nothing different on open space. We do limit how much the open space can be used for stormwater. That's 25%. Stormwater is always a challenge. You need it, but you also don't want to have a playground in a swamp.
Big, before you go further, I'm Ray, got a question. It says all open space must be privately owned. Does that mean it's owned by the HOA, or what does that mean? It's got to be privately owned.
What number was that in?
Number eight, right there where you're.
Okay.
Number 8. All open space shall be privately owned.
Unless deeded to the
HOA
city as a
owns it.
park.
They pay tax on the HOA would own that then.
Yes, that is correct. The HOA would own, it'd be common area to the HOA. That's pretty typical. What it's saying is that open space is not owned by an individual, but by the HOA as a common area, unless it's big enough, which is 2 acres. 2 acres is a benchmark number by most cities in terms of that's where it becomes a park. And in
the math for just a minute on that 2 acres. If it was 10 acres piece, that'd actually be 20% in park area. All we're requiring is 15. Sure.
Right.
So they put another 5% of their ground into park.
Correct.
Developer could do that. They could put 5% more than required into a park area.
Yes. And the benefit to them is that the city would take ownership and maintenance.
Just of the park. They still have to maintain all the rest of the common area.
Yes, that's correct.
Is that the park could become the city's. They'd have to maintain the rest of it.
That's correct. And we could add a line there that maybe the city would participate in making up for that extra 5% on, if that's something you like. I've seen that done quite a bit, where a developer says, okay, I've got 1.5 acres. I'm willing to make it a city park. Does the city want to, if I'll give the land, will the city contribute to building it and, work out something cooperatively, and you end up with a city park? That's actually what happened in my neighborhood.
That could happen possibly under a development agreement type thing.
Yes, and that would be through a development agreement. I just got a text message that someone's trying to get in. Might be.
It was Ryan and I've got him in now.
Oh, you got him in. Okay.
Might have got kicked out or, and then he just
Okay.
got back. Well, maybe.
Do you want me to add a line here about something about MDA and
I'm
Yeah,
okay,
yeah.
I'm okay with what you got. I don't necessarily need a line, but if you think it'd be better.
okay,
I'm okay with where it's at.
all right. Moving on, I added this, basically a minimum of 2 on-street parking stalls is required for the usable open space. I think that's going to happen naturally, but it's also saying that where that usable open space connects to the street, there should be the right of way that there's 2, on-street stalls, which is basically 40 feet. A parallel stall on a street is about 20 feet. And that'd be nice for maintenance coming in, access. You get 1 or 2 visitors, and just so there's a spot on the street to park. Okay, I added this section. Last time we talked about, we have in here a recommendation to foster owner-occupied dwelling units. How would we do that? This requirement would help us get there legally, but not force it. A minimum of 50% of the units are individually platted. And in order to sell a unit, it has to be individually platted. And so this basically sets it up. But you can't HOA, CC&Rs can require owner occupancy, but cities cannot require owner occupancy in terms of a whole unit.
Okay, question on that, Jay. Help me understand what individually platted means. Could an individual pick up a piece of ground from day one and build their own building on it? Or does this mean after they're all built, they need to sell them to an individual?
What it means is that half of the units have to have their own, parcel. With townhome developments and even sometimes with single family developments, they will all be on a single plat. Like today there are townhome communities that are being built for rental, and all of the units are on a single plat or 2 plats. This would require that half of the units be individually, platted on their own parcel, and that's a requirement for selling a piece of ground, is that it's its own parcel.
Okay, so what difference does that make?
It forces that at least half of the units are in a position that they could be individually sold.
Okay.
It actually goes a long way towards getting to setting things up for individual ownership. For example, the project that you recently, the HA development by Wardell, those are townhomes all on, 1 or 2 parcels. And that is intended and designed and meant to be for a rent community. If that type of project were in this zone, there would be design requirements and other things, and it'd look completely different. However, in terms of ownership, half of those units would have to have their own parcel or be platted, and that would move it as far as we could towards encouraging owner occupied units.
Okay.
And Mr. Chair, if you want to see one that is what he's talking about, Riverstone Townhomes is one that has individual plats, even though they're townhomes. And I can send you that plat to show you what he's talking about. There's common area, but they own their actual building.
So that's not talking about necessarily a person be able to design and build their own, just own their own after it's built. Okay, thank you.
Okay. Building variety, this is the same text as before. However, I clarified it a little bit, making sure that for, building next to building, 4 of the 8 have to be different. This allows for a lot of flexibility. However, it does move us towards having individual buildings. And I think that's one thing that would make this development unique is that the buildings are different. And I did add this clarification that each townhome or twin home is to be designed differently, but individual units don't have to be different. You know, take example, a building that has 3 townhomes in it. Collectively, they would look like one building, and townhome building next to it that has 3 other units would have to be different in 4 of the 8 ways, but the individual units themselves don't have to be different. It's very difficult, you know, for a single townhome that's part of a bigger building to be designed and built differently compared to a standalone building.
Jake, that brings up a question. How do we, as the commission, I resist the word enforce this, but this is one of the things that it seems like is brought to us. We don't really like it so much. And then we have what we had with Wardell's, that all of a sudden it was like we were telling them that we wanted them to do something that they wasn't prepared to do. So this is what the commission's been talking about for quite a while on, you know, pointing Morgan in a direction of that isn't just cookie cutter stuff. Is this going to help us? I guess my question, to start the process with these developers right off the get-go, that this is what we're expecting from these units that you're building? Is this going to help that?
Yes, absolutely. I mean, a couple things that's already different about this. The homes have to face the street, or they have to face a common green. That's different. The garages have to be either set back from the front or behind. That's different. Requiring variety is also different. And to me, this type of development is a balance between encouraging good design, but yet allowing for flexibility in the other hand. You know, we're creating this sandbox that we want developers and architects to play in, and we want to give them freedom, but then we're also drawing some boundaries around it, trying to eliminate bad design. And I think we've moved a long ways towards that. No zoning is ever perfect. That's why you're always tweaking and updating and changing things. And yet I think it does. There's a lot of things in here. The project that we've talked about would not be allowed to happen the way it is designed currently with these requirements. I mean, I don't want to poo-poo it, but just saying it wouldn't fit this mold that we're going towards.
So is there a way, one of the things that's always brought up is materials, colors, have a palette, you know, is there a way to put this in here so that the developer and the architect can look at it and go, okay, this is what the planning commission and the council's going to accept. And this is, and like the deal that we had the last meeting wasn't really a big ask, in my opinion. I mean, it was some simple things, but immediately it kind of got, you could tell that they weren't thinking that was a grand idea, that was asking them to change things. So yeah, if this lets us get out front and lets the developers know, this is a grand thing, I think.
It'll help for this overlay zone, but not for regular one. Just doesn't do anything to regular development.
Yeah.
Just the overlay one.
Yeah.
Correct.
Teresa, wasn't this part of the subject that we would have a developer come to a pre-planning meeting with, so that when it came into this room, they already know what the commission and council is gonna have for them to do?
Yeah, so our pre-development meeting is something for them to come in. They meet with engineer, planner, and all utilities, including those that are not part of the cities. We do go over all these elements. One of the things that Jake, so if I get this right, but an overlay zone will allow you to have design guidelines. When it's not in an overlay zone, we don't have currently in Morgan City's code, design guidelines. And like he said, if you are doing a regular subdivision, it is state law, you cannot require design guidelines. So for example, you were a little frustrated with H&A investments. We do have in the sensitive land overlay zone, a sensitive land ordinance, which is triggered by certain things, was that you do approve the renderings, but you can't get so specific. Is that true? You can't say, okay, I don't like that color, I can have this color, or I don't know how specific on that particular one. I don't know how far you can go to expect a certain design.
And looks like Steve's already dropped off, but I know that yes, the city can do it for apartments, and no, you can't do it for single family unless it's this type of situation. I can't remember where townhomes landed on state code, and I'll have to go back and look on that. However, this, I think I don't necessarily I don't encourage the city to get so specific that you have an exact color palette and exact materials, list only, specific architecture types. That's a little bit too much for me. However, the planning commission can choose to do that. The council can choose to adopt an ordinance if you like. This was set up, going that direction of good design, yet allowing for some flexibility on that. Thoughts?
My thought is if we just get, to me, it's human nature. We get it started in that direction, that architects, a lot of them, they have a lot of pride in what they're doing, and they want that building that they designed to look nice. And I think it would just be, I think Justin brought up a while ago on the little deal back there by Nampa, that we're talking about building that out and maybe doing something a little bit different than just sticking stuff in there. And I think it's, and I might be naive here, that if we get started, that it's, people will follow suit. Maybe not, without a little kicking and screaming, but I think we can't force them, but it would be nice to have just the kind of city that we want in 10, 15 years.
I would agree. And I think this is going in that direction. I added a requirement in terms of percentage of glass. These are very reasonable numbers. Windows, a little bit higher percentage facing the street. And I should actually change, I'm going to make a facing the street or common green. We need that in there because it's the same. Moving on, this is all some of the same. Yes.
This might be a really nitpicky thing, but
Yes.
small single-family homes would be subject to the same design standards that you outlined, right? That they would need to be distinct in 4 of those 8 ways within 400 feet?
Correct.
Okay, so
Correct.
it is nitpicky, but I feel like maybe we need to remove that picture that we have up there as an example. Scroll down a little more. Well, or up, sorry, up. Yeah. That one. To my mind, those 3 on the bottom are not distinct. And so I think we want to be sure to include examples that show what we're looking for.
Sure. Okay.
These three, yeah.
I'll look for another example. Small lot, single family are kind of hard to find. But
Yeah.
actually, I know where some are. I can get a picture. I do have that. I would say I could see in this case, so these two buildings, they basically mirror. So in that case, it would be different.
So mirror counts as different.
Well, it's a different form, that would be one of the four. Is that and then you could see some different colors
I gave
going
you
on.
colors and materials. And
So, I mean, this city didn't necessarily, this is Farmington, it may not have had this, I'm sure it didn't have our same requirements.
yeah, I just think we could probably find a better example. So
Okay.
that we can be really clear to any developers about what we're looking for.
Okay, I will do that. And I know where some pictures are. I have some that would work. Thank you. I'm just gonna make a note here for myself. Place. Sure.
Same thing with this one, that's not-
Jake, how long you want to take this out?
I mean, do you want to end at 8?
Sounds like a spectacular idea to me.
I could cruise through this and then I'll just move through things quickly. And I do think we're at a point where we could do a public hearing on this if you agree. Now that's up to the planning commission. Let me just move through it quickly over the next 5 minutes and then you can have a discussion. Do you want to bring it back one more time or do we take it out to a public hearing and see what the public thinks?
Same concept on some of the other pictures too, Jay. Back and look at a couple of those.
Okay.
Back.
In this case, this is a single building here. This one, maybe there's not enough variation. This one, I think, does have the variation, sizes, colors.
Go up further up towards the top. Go further towards, again. Right there.
Oh.
That single family, to me, doesn't fit the criteria as far as width and height and so forth, on the left top. That's the old style like we used to have in all the other subdivisions. That one doesn't fit our new standards.
This one would because the garage is set back. And that is allowed on the medium single family. This lot may be bigger.
The lots bigger than is allowed, or the minimums for sure.
Yeah. And it was meant to just show a garage pushed back.
Okay, that's fine.
The twin home examples don't all have porches either, and a porch is required, correct?
Correct.
Okay.
And maybe just make a note, I'll make a note that they're reference examples, not, it's hard to find something that's exactly what we're
hasn't been
talking
built
about. Yeah. Moving on.
I'd like to go back to building materials for a minute. On page 8.
Okay.
Talk about fiber cement board. Does that include stucco or just fiber cement board? Just hardy board? I mean, stucco.
So what this says here is that you need to have 30% of one of these materials: brick, stone, fabricated stone, or fiber cement. So those are probably the four most sought after, recognized materials.
What is
And
a
I
fiber
think
cement board?
as having a base of that
What
on
is
the
a
first floor.
It's that siding that looks like it's a 4x8 sheet and it has a seam that you can see sometimes you can't. I think. Huh?
It's
Okay.
not stucco.
No,
Okay,
not stucco.
They're saying we gotta have that material on all sides of the building, all four sides, top line.
The fronts of building. So only the front is
Read that
required
top
to
line
have that.
me. Read the top line to me. Underneath your, the very top line, buildings
All
buildings in the
sides.
MO zone must have high quality exterior finish materials on all sides.
But the
Oh,
other,
okay. I see what you're saying there.
But so
And
this is all sides.
yeah,
And down lower, you say 30% of the front's gotta have that, but up top, you say all sides can just have those materials. And that's all they can have.
the high quality rate could be siding.
No, but you specify what high quality is. You use your definition of what the, all you're including high quality is those four items.
Yeah, you're right.
It does, it says similar lap siding. About what it's trying to say is, you know, you don't want to get specific and say no aluminum siding. But it does say lap siding right there too, similar lap siding, glass or stone.
Then it specifies the front of the building must have brick.
And then the
Stone
front
in
of the
front,
building has to
yeah.
have at least 30% of windows.
Right, I get that. So you're saying, for example, you can't put stucco anywhere on the back side or sides then?
no,
can
you
have-
actually
I can have-
can,
I can have-
absolutely.
I can have a lap siding that's made out of wood that's gonna lose its paint, gotta repaint it, but I can't use stucco.
No, you can use stucco. You just have to have 30%.
No, without wording. Yeah, I use on front, but not anywhere else, not on
Yeah.
front. Side.
Well, why don't we take that sentence out and then I would say on any street facing. So that way, if you're on a corner lot, you need to wrap it.
I get that. The corner lots, your front and the wrapping side. But that top line says on all four sides, I've got to use those high quality materials.
I guess.
It's a little bit generic there on purpose. It's just meant to, you know, the builder, the developer needs to look at all four sides of it. Just tell me what you want to do with that.
I'm just saying, to me, it says that's all you can use on all four sides of my building. Be it on the front, come down further, it clarifies it's only gonna be 30%. The way I read that, 70% of my front can be something else. But everything else around the rest of my house has got to be those four items.
Ray, you're stuck on this. Let me fix it. We'll come back to it. Okay.
You guys, okay, whatever.
I see what you're saying. It can be fixed. Don't worry.
I know it can, yeah, I know it can be. I just bring it up.
Okay.
Back up to the garages.
Okay.
That one in the bottom center.
Okay.
In one location, it says that a side loading garage is gonna be 20 feet, 20 foot. Back on your standard, it says it's gotta have a 20-foot setback to the garage. Here it only says 4 foot. I'm not sure how those two work out.
So the garage has to be 4 feet back from the front of the facade.
Now turn your standards, look at your standards for a minute.
I know what it means. Let me explain it. So the garage has to be 4 feet back from the front of the facade, and then it has to be 20 feet back from the right of way.
But
If it's a front loading,
you're only require 7-foot setback.
that's for the home, not the garage.
The garage just
Okay.
has to be 4 foot back from the front of the house.
And if it's front loading, 20 feet back from the right of way.
That's the front of the house.
So is that a front loading one? That one you got the pointer on?
Yes.
So how can that be 20 foot back with only a 7-foot front setback for the house?
So the garage has to be pushed back.
20 feet back,
Yeah. And these are minimums. The home,
4 feet
so
back.
the building home is a minimum of 7 feet, from the sidewalk, the right of way.
right?
And then the garage has to be 4 feet behind that, but it also has to be 20 feet from the right of way.
So help me, so the whole house has got to go back. If 16 feet, not 7. The whole house has got to be set back 16 feet then.
If or they just have it really, or that 4 foot is longer than 7. If they wanted to have the home at 7 feet, then the garage would have to be pushed back 13 feet behind the front of the home.
But you're right, in my mind, there's a conflict here. It's only gonna be 4 foot back. In their place, it's gotta be 20 feet back. So in my mind, there's a conflict between the two standards.
So
The front door of the house and the front door of the garage are different levels of depth. Bottom line. So the front door, and it's a long hallway, and then there's a garage on the right. It's this picture in the middle, that garage in the picture on the sharing. That front middle image, the gray area would be much longer and the garage would be set back much further. You just need to think of the front doors, the front door of the garage and the front door of the house. Right?
correct.
So you're telling me if I have one like that in the middle, my garage will be 4 foot from the front of my house, I get that. But if it's gotta be 20 feet from the side, and my house gotta be pushed back 16 feet, not 7.
No, the garage gets pushed back into the house footprint, not the front door. The front door of the house stays at 7 feet, and then the garage front door goes way back.
Jake, can we just look at these numbers and get through this?
Yes. Maybe someone can kind of draw it out for Ray. I think that might help. If I were there, I'd Sharpie it out so he'd see that. But it does work, Ray. So
Draw it on a napkin and send it to me then.
okay, I'll do that. You have to understand that it's based off of minimums, and there's also flexibility in there. They're not, there's exact minimums, but not maximums. And so there is flexibility there in terms of the building.
The shape of the state of Utah is a perfect example. The top part of Utah where,
Bear Lake.
no, not Bear Lake, not that far right, on the left, Snowville.
Okay, there you go.
Snowville is 7 feet away from Idaho. But Evanston, Oakley is 20, what is it, 20 feet? Was that the minimum?
Yes.
Oakley is 20 feet away from Wyoming. And Snowville is 7 feet from Idaho. That's how it works. Just think of the state of Utah.
Thank you. I love it.
Okay.
So on that, the front loaded only happens on the medium single family homes. And that's where it comes in at 20 feet. Everything else, it's not applicable because they're coming off of an alley. And that's where those are minimum of 4 feet. Any questions on the standards?
Back up one page. Just to question how sidewalks, road widths, we talk about needing a road width standard, a alley standard, utility standards. If we're gonna go with our current standards, it makes it much different than if we're gonna change those standards. At one point you said we're gonna change those standards. We haven't done that yet. This picture here doesn't show sidewalks in there, but others pictures of actual houses show sidewalks between the house and the alleyway, so they can get out to the common spaces.
That would work like shown on the front picture. Right here. Walk out your front door,
Yep.
Take the
The side-
sidewalk to the street.
Yep, I get that.
Okay. In terms of alley and
Just didn't show
road
that.
dimensions, I'm having conversations with Matt and engineering, and we're coming up with something on that. The sidewalk dimension, I think, would just match the cities, which is that 5 feet, Teresa? That's a very common sidewalk dimension in Utah.
Isn't ours 4 feet? 4 feet.
Okay, I would recommend 5. That's the typical standard in most cities, unless you do want to go more narrow.
I have to check.
This,
'Cause I know we have some-
this view just doesn't show the sidewalk layout in their layouts. Some of the other pictures show.
There will be a cross section in the zone of the alleys,
On this,
and the street only if we change the street.
on one point on the rear setback for alley and garages, we talked about 6 and you got 4 here. Like, I'm okay either way. I just want to know if it's gonna stay 4 or go 6.
Whatever the planning commission recommends. 4 is enough for a trash can, a little bit of room. It isn't big enough to park on, but that's intended. It doesn't have to be. That it would need to be.
That include the sidewalk.
Well, this is on the alley. There's no sidewalks on the alley.
I thought in the highway you're supposed to have access to get to the common ground, as I read another location. Do you need sidewalks on your alley or no?
No sidewalks on the alley. That's where the cars go and they pull into the garages from behind.
In the
The
picture-
sidewalk goes on the front of the home.
So no parking on the alley, no parking on your driveway.
Yes, there can be parking on the driveway if it's designed to be big enough.
It's only 4 feet long.
This is a minimum. If the developer wants to have a driveway and then a garage behind, which some do, they could do that. If they want to have you pull right into your garage from the alley, then you could do that as well.
Okay, so this type, right, it gets minimum. So this type, there's no parking on the driveway or the alley.
On the minimum, yes.
You're parking. your
But-
driveway, or you're parking down the street.
It does require,
I just want to clarify so we all understand. I'm okay. I'm not fine. I'm okay with it. I am. I just want to make sure we understand what it's saying and we clarify in our minds. I'm okay with it. I'm not fighting against it, trying to change it.
okay,
Okay, down the bottom. It said you gotta have a parking area within 150 feet. So that means on a single family, every 4 homes, you gotta have a parking lot. And that
for
means
2 of the stalls.
medium
One
size-
has to be a garage.
On the medium-sized families, every 3 homes, you're gonna have a parking lot. And on the townhomes, every 2 buildings, you're gonna have a parking lot.
Jake, hasn't this been taken from other development? So it's kind of, they've figured out this ratio and stuff,
Yeah,
like on the parking and.
yeah.
Yeah.
3 per unit is very typical. This does allow some flexibility in that you don't have to have a 2-car garage on every unit. A lot of the market wants that, but it's not necessarily required.
That's all awesome. I'm just trying to point out, just so you're aware, every 3 homes, you're gonna have a parking lot. To accommodate. demand.
It's not intended to be a parking lot, but it could be a stall, a few stalls.
It's gotta be stalled big enough for 7 cars.
Or they could do a 2-car garage and, 1 unit on the side, or push it back and do 2 units with it on a driveway.
We run into this over North Morgan in that development, that we had to figure out parking at the end of the blocks, and yeah, it stinks. Had to walk a long ways, but
And I'm not saying it's wrong or bad. I'm just trying to indicate what to me, it looks like it's gonna happen. I'm okay with it. When people buy into it and they know what they're doing, I'm okay with that. I'm just trying to get us to visualize what it actually is gonna look like or be. That's all I'm trying to say.
Okay.
I'm not against it.
I understand.
Do you want to see all the parking stalls directly with the unit?
No, I'm okay with the way it is. I'll pay.
Okay.
I'm not sure you can get them all right with that, on their property, keep them on their property. There's not enough square footage in the lot. Particularly, you got those 5 townhome units. And you got three per building. There's not enough, you can't get enough parking on that square footage of the ground.
Welcome
You
to
gotta
living in
parking lot.
townhomes.
Okay. If anything, I would, we could take this number down to 100 feet. Just to,
No,
making it a little bit closer.
That just puts them closer and puts more parking spaces, more parking lots in there. I think numbers fine. I just want to be able to see what it's actually gonna look like. That's
Okay.
all I'm gonna say.
And I agree that that does undermine the effort to make it look like a more organic neighborhood, to have
You have
little
parking
parking
lots
lots
little
every
parking
200
lots every
feet.
5 houses.
Yeah.
Every 4 houses. Every other
Parking
townhome,
is a
every
challenge.
townhome, they're full of parking.
Yeah.
Is that what you want to have? That's what it's looking, that's what it's.
Well, that's looking at it one way. The other ways they could, a lot of townhome developments do have the garages and the driveway right there with it. This adds some flexibility
Okay,
to it. But it's at the discretion of the city.
talking about what large trees are. Medium trees and small trees.
Right.
Oh, he's-
I know.
He's
it's-
going.
We'll just add some definitions to it. It basically, a maple, an oak, things like that.
I did that in my backyard. Yeah, me too.
Let me just tell you where I'm heading with this. You say the small trees are not permitted as street trees. The small tree is 20-foot diameter. So half that's going to be 10 feet from the tree to your house. Your house only 7 foot away from your property line. So a medium tree is going to be 30, 40 feet diameter. That's putting 15 feet towards your house. Your house only 7 foot away from the sidewalk. So the tree's going to cover your house or be in your house.
Have you ever been to Sugar House?
No, I haven't.
The only thing I would change on this is that the park strip probably needs to be 7 feet for the large trees. That's probably the one thing that would actually need to change.
You do what?
But most probably won't go that way.
Yeah, I can't see large trees in the front yard of anything.
I'm probably loony, but maybe I've seen it wrong. You're saying you have a medium or large tree, which is obviously 30, 40 feet in diameter, which is 15 feet from the park strip of your house. Your house only 7 foot away.
That's why you prune them.
On this one, Jake, I think this might not be a bad idea to do some little research and kind of say, okay, this is what is acceptable in the park strip, because down where I live, everything's kind of uniform. They're ugly crabapple trees, but they only grow so big and they don't tear up sidewalks and stuff like that. So I don't know if this wouldn't be a good idea to maybe do a little.
What's typical to do with this is we could have a tree list that is managed by the city and staff and can be updated. It doesn't require ordinance updates and just require that the the street tree plan comes from the tree list. And that allows for conformity and following best practices. But the planning commission doesn't have to argue over, specific varieties and species with the developer on it.
I like that.
Hey,
And also allows us to exclude the ones that are not the right choice.
Mhm.
there is in our ordinance in the landscape of, approved trees.
Oh, there we go. The city already has it.
Yeah, Steve, about 3 or 4 years ago, we had issues with trees that we had to cut down at maturity due to what it was doing to the
The
sidewalk.
specific ones.
So what we did was we actually did some nurseries and landscape architect kind of went through the list. And it's in our ordinance. I think I don't know where it is, but we have it.
Okay, I'll take a look at that. When you have a minute, Teresa, if you could send that over.
Okay.
The only thing I don't love about it being in an ordinance is a lot of new varieties are available all the time, and there's a lot of movement in the nursery business based off of availability. And it's hard for a city to move fast to, have the type of trees that are appropriate and also in stock or being grown and shipped down from Oregon. Okay, anything else on this page?
Yeah, on the grass, help me understand the grass piece.
The idea is just have, bring down the grass amount. Grass is the biggest water waster, and that number is extremely reasonable on it.
For example, number 1.
Yep.
If I have to have a piece of grass 8 feet wide in all directions, I don't mind that. If my front setback's only 7 feet, plus I have some foundation plantings, that means I can have no grass in my front yard. And you'll have no
Right.
front yards down the whole street.
Correct. And there's no reason to.
Just so you're aware. Because other times planning commission say, oh, I like the grass. You say, the way this is worded, and I'm okay with that. I'm not against it. Just want everybody to understand there'll be no grass in any front yards.
Unless they have a larger setback. And
Unless you decide to go with a further setback, further than anybody else. If one developer's developing the whole thing, he's probably not gonna do that.
and that's okay. The idea is to have the grass where people will use it. And that 8-foot number is very specific because that's how sprinklers work typically, maintenance practices, those kind of things. It's the intent is to not have grass be this default, land cover kind of thing. One of the best rules of thumb of thinking about grass is if the only time you walk on it is to mow it, you probably don't need it as grass.
Yeah, that's fine. I just, again, I'm okay with it. I just want everybody to realize and understand what it's saying. Before, and he's not here tonight, but before we had a planning commission member, he wanted to push grass pretty heavy. He didn't like that. He wanted grass in his front yard. But he's not here tonight. We don't have to worry about that yet.
Well, it's a good question, and I know we don't want to spend longer on it. There is a part of me that says 60% of total landscaped area might be a little narrow. If they want to push more there, but we get what the intent is.
60% is actually a very generous number and compared to what a lot of cities are going towards.
I think we all need to remember this. Young people don't want lawnmowers. They don't want grass. They want to go to your house and sit in your backyard and use your grass. It's this, there's the future. This is what's being built. And so for a young person to come in and go, I don't have to mow any lawn. It's awesome. So it's different for us sitting here. but I think it makes sense.
Well, and that doesn't factor in the grass in the common areas too,
Yeah.
right?
Exactly. And
Alright.
intentionally, this doesn't limit grass in common areas.
Yes. There's grass.
Go ahead, Mayor.
So I received a letter from the governor today about this new landscape ideas. And it sounds like lots of things are going to change. Or hoping that they'll change from the state to these kinds of situations that when I was reading through it, it cuts back on lawn a whole bunch. But I just received it today. I was going to bring it over. Then I thought, no, we'll get 2 hours worth of discussion on it. So there are some things pending that we'll probably have to adjust, but just let me make you aware that the pending is smaller than bigger as far as green grass.
And regarding that, Mayor, if I could just add on, because I did read that letter, is that if the city enacts new landscape ordinances that are water-wise going in this direction, that the city will be eligible, that residents at their own free will and choice can remove grass and be paid $1.50 a square foot to remove grass and replace it with water-wise landscape. But the city is only eligible if they have water-wise landscaping ordinance that meet state requirements. And that's an opt-in program, not a forced program.
Right, but it has a pretty good incentive.
Yeah, it's a great incentive.
Yeah.
And that's the direction that Southern Nevada Water Authority's been going at for a couple decades. They found it's cheaper to pay people to pull out grass to save water in the future than it is to, let them continue to, maintain the same practices and have water for everybody else. Okay, I'm moving on from that. We're almost done here. Thanks for hanging on. And that's it. So sounds like we need one more month of this before we do a public hearing. So maybe we discuss this in March one more time with the revised version, adding the alley cross section and buttoning up a couple of these items. And then potentially in April, we could have a public hearing from the Planning Commission. Thoughts on that before we wrap up?
Just one, Jake, on that setback thing, it seems some confusion, the 4 foot, and the 7 foot, the 20 foot. Can you kind of bring something that simple mind like mine can understand that too?
Yeah, we can I can add a diagram for that. And the numbers don't always have to be, there are minimums, but there's flexibility in there as well.
Okay.
One more question, Jake. On a alleyway, there's no sidewalk there?
Correct, and alley is for driving.
No.
There's a picture that shows where, in one of this now, but the alley will have no sidewalk, it's in the front home.
Okay, thank you. Okay, thank you, makes sense. Okay.
Jake, anything?
Nope, thank you.
I think that, okay. Anybody? Let's adjourn this meeting.
Have a good evening, drive safe.